If you ever find yourself stuck in a citywide blackout, alone and surrounded by nothing but darkness, you might expect panic or chaos. But what I didn't expect was to end up sharing that silence with the one guy the first never thought I'd see again. It was one of those nights where the city just seemed to pause. No hum of the subway, no distant sirens, not even the usual buzz of streetlights or neon signs. Just silence, thick and heavy, broken only by the occasional murmur of confused neighbors. I'd been at a late shift at the bookstore downtown, an old place that still smelled like paper and coffee, when everything went dark. One moment, I was stacking a pile of new arrivals. The next, the power cut out so suddenly it felt like the air was, "Please me," right out of the room. I fumbled for my phone, but even the screen died, leaving me staring into absolute black. I wasn't the only one trapped inside the bookstore. Someone from the next aisle spoke up, voice steady but low. I turned and saw him. Jamie, who I hadn't seen since that messy breakup 6 months ago. The guy I thought I'd never run into again. Same messy hair, same sharp eyes that always had a way of catching mine, like he was waiting for me to say something I couldn't. For a moment, everything felt like it was suspended in time. The kind of awkward silence that hits when you realize you're not just standing next to an ex, but also the last two people conscious in a citywide blackout. Outside, the streets were pitch black. The city had shut down. And somehow, by some cosmic joke, we were the last to awake in an entire urban sprawl of millions. I wasn't sure if it was the darkness or the weird quiet, but suddenly, it felt like a chance to talk without all the usual noise, without the distractions of bright city lights or the endless scroll of my phone. Jamie's voice cut through the silence again, quieter this time. "You okay?" I wanted to say no. I wanted to say that 6 months of ghosting, mixed signals, and heartbreak didn't just vanish because the power did. But instead, I found myself nodding. Or maybe just pretending to. Because here we were, trapped in the dark, and the city felt smaller than ever. That's when I realized this blackout wasn't just about losing electricity. It was about getting caught in a moment neither of us saw coming. And as the night stretched on, I started wondering if maybe, just maybe, this forced pause could be the thing that finally made us listen to what was left unsaid. But none of that was clear yet. Not until the power stayed off longer than anyone expected, and we had no choice but to start talking. Really talking. Jamie cleared his throat, and I could barely see the way his eyes caught the faint glimmer of the emergency exit sign. Greenish and dull, but still glowing enough to make out the edges of his face. "Do you want to sit down?" he asked, his voice a little unsure, like he wasn't sure this was really happening either. I hesitated for a second, then shrugged. Why not? We're not exactly going anywhere. The fact that we were stuck in a bookstore without electricity felt oddly fitting. A place where stories waited to be told, now waiting for us to tell one. We shuffled over to the little seating area near the front, where a couple of armchairs were pushed together. I settled into one, and Jamie took the other, close enough that I could see the faint crease by his mouth when he smiled, a smile I remembered too well. "So, blackout's city-wide, huh?" Jamie said, breaking the silence again. I tried calling my roommate, but no dice. Guess he's as stranded as us. "Yeah, nothing on the radio, nothing on my phone. It's like the whole city just shut off." He nodded, then laughed softly, almost to himself. "I never thought I'd say this, but this blackout might be the best thing to happen to me in a while." I raised an eyebrow. "Really? How's that?" Jamie shrugged, tilting his head back. "I don't know. It's kind of like a forced reset. No distractions, no screens, no pretending everything's fine. Just this." I looked around the dark bookstore, the outlines of bookshelves and chairs blurred in the dim exit light. For once, there was no noise to drown out thoughts I'd been trying to ignore. Like how much I missed this guy, how much I regretted the way things ended. "Yeah," I said quietly. "I get that." We sat there for a moment, the silence between us less uncomfortable than I expected. Maybe it was the blackout, or maybe it was just us finally being forced to face the space between us. After a bit, Jamie leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Remember that spring break trip we planned? The one we never took?" I laughed softly. the memory catching me off guard. How could I forget? You wanted to hike the Appalachians, and I was more interested in finding every coffee shop along the way. He smiled, a little wistfully. I guess we missed a chance to make some better memories. Yeah, we did. The words hung there, like they carried more weight than either of us wanted to admit. Suddenly, a faint beep cut through the darkness. Jamie pulled out a small flashlight from his jacket pocket, one of those keychain ones. He flicked it on, and the beam landed on my face, making me squint. Well, look at you, I teased. Prepared for the apocalypse, Jamie shrugged, a little embarrassed. You never know. I realized then that even in the dark, he still had this way of making me feel seen. Not just a ghost from the past, but someone worth paying attention to. So what have you been up to, I asked, trying to sound casual but failing. The truth was, I wanted to know everything and nothing about him since we'd parted ways. Jamie hesitated, then said, "Work's been crazy. I'm still at that design firm, but lately, everything feels off, like I'm stuck, waiting for something to change." "Yeah, I know the feeling," I said. "The bookstore's been the same too. Quiet, predictable. Sometimes I wonder if I'm just holding on to things because I'm scared to let go." Jamie looked at me then, eyes serious. Maybe we're both scared. He was right. I was scared. Scared of reopening old wounds. Scared of what might happen if I let myself care again. But being here, with no distractions, no excuses, it was like the blackout stripped away all the noise we used to hide behind. And suddenly, it didn't feel so terrifying. We talked for hours, or at least it felt like hours, though there was no way to tell without clocks or phones. We shared stories, some funny, some painful, and as the night wore on, the tension between us softened into something quieter, more real. At one point, Jamie reached over and touched my hand. Just a light brush, but it sent a shock through me, like waking up after a long sleep. "I missed this," he said, voice low. I swallowed hard. "Me too." For a moment, the entire city might as well have been buried in darkness, because in that little bookstore, in the glow of a tiny flashlight, it felt like we were the only two people left in the world. And honestly, I didn't want the lights to come back on. Not yet. That light touch of Jamie's hand on mine lingered longer than I expected, and suddenly, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt like an invitation. Like the blackout had opened a door neither of us dared to knock on before. We stayed like that for a while, our fingers just barely brushing, until my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, but the screen was still dead. No signal, no power, nothing but that stubborn, dead weight of a phone battery refusing to come back to life. I sighed and slipped it back into my pocket. Jamie caught the movement and gave me a half smile. "No news from the outside world." "Not yet," I said. "But I'm guessing the power's out for good tonight." We exchanged a look, both of us realizing that we were stuck in this blackout for longer than either of us had hoped. It was the kind of situation where options narrowed down to two things: panic or make the best of it. Jamie cleared his throat. "Hey, do you want to do something stupid? Like, try to find candles or something? I'm sure there's got to be some emergency supplies in the back." I chuckled softly. "Yeah, let's live dangerously. Lead the way, Apocalypse Guide." He laughed too, the sound breaking through the quiet like sunlight piercing a cloud. We got up and made our way carefully toward the back storage room, stepping over piles of books and shuffling awkwardly in the dark. Once inside, Jamie flipped on his flashlight and started rummaging through boxes. After a minute, he held up a small pack of tea light candles and a box of matches. "Jackpot," he said, grinning. We carried the candles back to the seating area and arranged them around us, lighting each one with deliberate care. The flickering flames cast dancing shadows on the walls, transforming the bookstore into something warm and intimate. Sitting down again, the atmosphere shifted. The glow of candlelight made Jamie's features soft and familiar. I found myself studying him, the way his eyes caught the light, the slight tremble in his smile like he was holding back something. So I started. "What's been holding you back?" "From, everything." Jamie looked down at the candle between his fingers. "Fear, mostly. Fear of messing up again. Fear of getting close and losing it all. I guess I shut down because it felt safer than being vulnerable." I nodded. "Yeah, same here. I thought walking away was the easy choice, but it's just left this gap. Jamie's eyes met mine, honest and searching. Do you think we can close that gap? Or am I just chasing a ghost? The question hit me harder than I expected, because I'd been chasing a ghost too. Our memories, our good times, hoping they'd be enough to fix what broke. I want to try, I said softly. If you do. He smiled, that real smile this time, the kind that makes you believe maybe things can be different. We talked until the candles burned low, sharing dreams we'd tucked away, fears we'd hidden behind sarcasm and silence. The blackout forced us to strip away the distractions and face each other like two people who had a chance, maybe, to rewrite the story. At some point, the power came back on. The lights flickered and buzzed, and for a moment, I thought the magic of the night would shatter. But then Jamie reached out, took my hand again, and held it tightly. Maybe the blackout isn't over, he said, smiling, and in that moment, I believed him. Because sometimes, the darkest nights bring the brightest chances. The lights flickered back on with a sudden hum that felt almost too loud after hours of silence. The harsh fluorescent glow made the familiar bookstore look sterile, less magical than it had under the flicker of candlelight. I blinked a few times, adjusting to the brightness, and when I looked over, Jamie still held my hand like he wasn't ready to let go. It was weird, how something as ordinary as electricity could feel like a barrier all of a sudden. Like the blackout had created this bubble, this secret world where we could be honest without pretending. And now that the city was buzzing back to life, it was like we were being dragged back into reality. Jamie squeezed my hand gently, as if sensing what I was thinking. I guess it's back to the real world now. Yeah, I said, reluctantly releasing his hand. Back to emails, deadlines, and pretending we're fine. He gave a crooked smile. Or maybe not. Maybe we don't have to pretend anymore. I wanted to believe him, but I was cautious. We'd been down this road before. Good intentions fading into silence, promises broken by fear and doubts. What do you mean? I asked, lowering my voice. The energy in the room felt different, charged with something unspoken. Jamie leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. I mean, this blackout. It forced us to talk, to be real, and maybe that's what we need. No distractions, no running away. I considered it. For months, I'd been avoiding him, avoiding the messy feelings that still clung to me like shadows. But now, sitting here, I realized the blackout had done more than just darken the city. It had lit up a path I'd been too afraid to walk. Okay, I said finally, so what's the next step? How do we start over? Jamie's eyes softened. Maybe we don't have to start over. Maybe we just keep going, from here. That simple idea hit me harder than any grand gesture ever could. We weren't erasing the past. We were acknowledging it, learning from it. And that felt real. Just then, the door to the bookstore creaked open, and a wave of light and noise spilled in. A few other people who'd been trapped inside during the blackout shuffled in, blinking and murmuring about power coming back. Jamie and I exchanged a look, a silent agreement passing between us. The world outside was waking up, but maybe, just maybe, so were we. As the night turned into early morning, we helped gather the few stray customers and employees, making sure everyone was okay. The city was alive again, but something had shifted between us, a quiet understanding that the blackout was more than just a power failure. It was a chance. Before we left, Jamie pulled me aside. I'm serious about this, he said. About us, no more running. I nodded, feeling a mix of hope and nervousness. No more running. Outside, the streetlights buzzed back on. Cars started moving, and the city breathed a new kind of energy. But for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Walking away, I glanced back at the bookstore's glowing sign. It had always been my sanctuary, but tonight it was something more. A place where darkness had brought us back to the light. The next few days felt like walking through a fog, but a good kind of fog. The kind that lets you focus on just one thing instead of a million distractions pulling you in every direction. After that blackout night, Jamie and I ended up texting. At first, it was just small talk. Made it home okay? Did you lose power at your place too? But it didn't take long before the conversations got deeper. The kind we used to have before everything got messy. One evening, I found myself nervously standing outside this little coffee shop near the bookstore. Jamie had suggested we meet up, face to face, no distractions, no blackout, just two guys trying to figure out what was next. The place was cozy, with warm lighting and shelves of books lining the walls, kind of like a mini version of where we'd first reconnected. I walked in and spotted him already sitting at a corner table, fiddling with his coffee cup like he was trying to calm his nerves. When he saw me, his smile was genuine but shy, like he wasn't sure if this was real or just another dream. "Hey," I said, sliding into the seat across from him. "Hey," he replied, his eyes holding mine a little longer than usual. We talked, really talked. About work, about the blackout, about all the stuff we never said before. There were pauses, moments when the words felt heavy, but somehow that made it easier to be honest. I told him how I'd missed him, not just as a boyfriend or an ex, but as a person who'd shaped so much of who I was. He admitted he'd felt the same way, even when he tried to push the feelings away. At some point, Jamie reached across the table and took my hand. The warmth of his touch was comforting, grounding. "I don't want to make the same mistakes," he said quietly. "But I want to try, if you'll have me." I squeezed his hand back. "I want that too." We spent hours there until the coffee shop started dimming the lights to close. Walking out into the cool night air, the city felt different. It wasn't just about the blackout anymore. It was about what came after, about possibility, about hope. Over the next few weeks, we fell into a rhythm: meetups after work, long walks through the park, lazy Sundays with bad movies and better company. The blackout had been a strange kind of reset, a forced pause that gave us space to see each other again without all the noise. But, as always, life has a way of testing you, just when you think things are going smoothly. One night, a message popped up on my phone from Jamie. "Can we talk? Like, really talk? I mean it." My heart did this weird flip. I knew that really talk wasn't just casual. I agreed, and we met up at the bookstore, the place where it had all started again. Jamie looked serious, his usual easygoing smile replaced by something more vulnerable. "I've been offered a job in another city, a big opportunity. It's everything I've worked for." I forced myself to stay calm. "That's amazing. But," he continued, "it means moving in a month. I don't want to leave. Not like this." I felt the weight of those words settle between us. The future we'd been building suddenly felt fragile, hanging in the balance. "What do you want to do?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Jamie looked me in the eye. "I want to figure out if there's a us that can survive distance, if we're worth fighting for." I swallowed hard, realizing that the blackout had given us a chance to reconnect, but now it was on us to decide if this was just a moment or something more. "I want to fight for us," I said, reaching for his hand. "But we have to be honest with ourselves and each other." He nodded, relief mingling with uncertainty. "So, what's next?" I smiled, a little nervously. "We take it one day at a time, like we did that night in the dark." Jamie squeezed my hand, and for a moment, everything felt possible again. The city outside was alive with light and noise, but inside, we'd learned that sometimes the darkest moments can bring you closer to what matters. And as scary as the future looked, I was ready to face it. With him. The weeks leading up to Jamie's move felt like walking a tightrope stretched between hope and reality. We kept our routine as normal as possible. Coffee dates, long talks, stolen kisses by the bookstore's closing sign. But underneath it all, there was this quiet countdown ticking away, reminding us that things were about to change. I won't lie, it was tough. There were mornings I woke up and caught myself staring at my phone, willing a text from Jamie to appear, some little sign that everything was still okay. And when I'd see his name pop up, my heart would skip, only to sink a little when I remembered how soon he'd be leaving. One Saturday afternoon, a few days before his move, We decided to spend the day exploring the city, like we were trying to cram a lifetime of memories into a single day. We wandered through the streets, visiting old haunts and discovering new corners I'd never noticed before. The sky was bright, and the air had that crispness that made you want to hold on to every moment. At one point, we found ourselves sitting on the edge of the riverwalk, legs dangling over the water. Jamie tossed a pebble into the river, watching the ripples spread out and disappear. "You know," he said quietly, "I've been thinking about that night when the blackout happened. How weird it is that something so dark could bring us back together." I smiled. "Sometimes the darkest moments shine the brightest." He looked at me, eyes a little misty. "I'm scared. Not just about moving, but about us. About whether we can hold on to what we've built." I reached out and took his hand. "We've been through a lot already. If we can survive being the last two awake in a blackout, I think we can survive this." He laughed softly, the sound shaky but genuine. "You always know what to say." "Only when I mean it," I replied. The truth was, I didn't know how this was going to end. Long-distance relationships are hard, and we both had our lives pulling us in different directions. But sitting there with him, feeling the warmth of his hand in mine, I realized that wasn't the point. The point was that we wanted to try, that we were willing to face the uncertainty together. That night, after dinner, we sat on my couch, the city lights twinkling through the window. Jamie leaned his head on my shoulder, and I wrapped my arm around him, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "Promise me something?" he asked. "Anything. That no matter what happens, we don't lose this. Us." I kissed the top of his head. "I promise." The day Jamie left was a blur of hugs, tears, and promises to call every day. Watching him walk away at the airport, suitcase in hand, I felt that familiar ache of loss, but also a flicker of hope. We'd started something real during that blackout, something that wasn't going to fade just because miles came between us. The first few weeks apart were hard. Video calls, late-night texts, and the gnawing loneliness of not having him physically near. But we made it work because we believed in what we had. And every now and then, when the city lights dimmed for a second, or when life felt too overwhelming, I'd remember that blackout night. How, in the darkness, we found each other again. How sometimes the unexpected turns out to be exactly what you need. So yeah, being the last two awake in a citywide blackout, it changed everything. And I'm grateful for every second of it. The distance between us quickly revealed itself to be a different kind of challenge, one that no blackout could prepare me for. I remember the first weekend after Jamie moved, sitting alone in my apartment, the silence almost deafening. The city was alive outside my window, glowing with lights and energy, but inside, everything felt hollow. I scrolled through my phone, desperately wishing for a message from him, and when it came, my heart skipped. But even those texts, no matter how sweet, couldn't replace the warmth of his presence. We tried to keep the momentum going. Video calls that sometimes lasted hours, sharing our days, venting frustrations about work, laughing at the little things. But inevitably, there were those moments when the screen between us felt like an ocean, wide and cold. One night, after a particularly long day at work, I called him. His face lit up on the screen, but I could see the exhaustion behind his smile. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "Hey," he replied, running a hand through his hair. "Rough day?" You have no idea. We sat in silence for a beat, both missing the comfort of proximity. "Do you ever think about us?" Jamie asked suddenly, his voice barely above a whisper. "All the time." I admitted, "I'm scared, that maybe this distance is going to break us. I'm scared too." I paused, searching for the right words. "But I want to fight for this. For us." He nodded, relief washing over his face. "Me too." That conversation became a turning point. We started planning visits, weekends when one of us would hop on a train or a plane just to close the gap, even if only for a few hours. Each reunion was a mix of excitement and nervousness, like first dates all over again but layered with the history between us. One weekend, Jamie surprised me by showing up unannounced at the bookstore. I was closing up when he walked through the door, holding a bouquet of wildflowers. "I thought I'd bring a little color back into your life," he said, grinning. I laughed, feeling my chest tighten. "You have no idea how much I needed this. We spent that evening curled up in the bookstore's back room, the familiar scent of paper and ink wrapping around us like a warm blanket. The city was buzzing outside, but inside, it felt like time had slowed. Just for USA's weeks turned into months, we found a rhythm that worked. The distance didn't feel like a chasm anymore, but more like a stretch of road we were willing to travel together. We learned to communicate better, to be honest about our fears and hopes, and slowly, the ache of separation softened into something manageable. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for, the day Jamie called me with news that changed everything. "I got the offer," he said, voice trembling with excitement. "They want me to move back." I blinked, stunned. "Wait, what? Really?" "Yeah, it's official. I can't believe it." For the first time in what felt like forever, my heart soared. The blackout that had forced us into each other's lives months ago was coming full circle. The city that had once plunged into darkness was about to become the backdrop of our new beginning. When Jamie finally moved back, we didn't rush. We took it slow, rebuilding what we'd started in the shadows. Every morning coffee, every quiet evening walk, every shared laugh felt like a victory. One night, as we stood on the rooftop of my apartment building, looking out over the city lights, Jamie turned to me and said, "You know, I never thought a blackout could lead to this." I smiled, pulling him close. Sometimes the darkest moments show us where the light really is, and in that city that once went dark, we found a love that refused to fade. Months passed after Jamie moved back, and life settled into a comfortable rhythm neither of us had expected, but both of us cherished. We weren't perfect. There were still moments of doubt, miscommunication, and the kind of stubbornness that only comes from knowing someone too well. But there was also laughter, support, and the steady knowing that we were in this together. One quiet Sunday afternoon, we found ourselves back at the bookstore, the place where the blackout had brought us back to each other. The shop was bathed in soft afternoon light, the familiar scent of paper and coffee wrapping around us like a warm hug. Jamie was flipping through a poetry book while I restocked some shelves. Without looking up, he said, "You ever think about how weird it is? How a citywide blackout became the start of everything for us?" I smiled, setting the books down. "Yeah. Funny how the darkest moments can lead to the brightest beginnings." He closed the book and looked at me, his eyes steady and warm. "I'm glad we didn't give up. On us." "Me too," I said, stepping closer. "I guess sometimes it takes losing the lights to see what really matters." Jamie reached out, taking my hand in his. We stood there, surrounded by stories and memories, both old and new, knowing that our story was still being written, one we were ready to write together. In a city that had once gone dark, we found a light that didn't need electricity to shine. It was the kind of light that comes from understanding, forgiveness, and the courage to try again. And that, I think, is what love really is.